Hi, Alf.
Hi.
We are going to do classification. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Now, do you ever go for walks with me around the walks and see plants, animals, creatures, bits of nature, and think to yourself, I wonder what that tree is. I wonder what that flower is. I wonder what that fish is, and so on.
Yeah.
Well, if we just had a huge long list of creatures, it would make it very difficult for you to identify. You'd have to go, is it a buttercup? Is it a daisy? Is it rosebay, willow, herb? What on earth is this flower? You'd be there all day, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But one of the things we can do is we can use what's called a binary key. And a binary key asks a question which has got a yes, no answer and helps us to identify it. So let's say, for example, we had all of the children in your class here. So this is your whole class at school. And let's suppose the first question was, are you a boy or are you a girl? Okay, so you can imagine
Mhm.
that. The question might be, are you a boy? So let's just put the question here, boy, question mark, okay? And this would be yes, this would obviously be no. Make sense?
Mhm.
So we've got all the boys here. Now, can you think of a question that you could ask the boys that would divide them in half?
Can you two groups move to the different sides of the classroom, please?
Well, that's that would divide them in half. But you know, you've got you're a genius. But you've got to ask them you've got to present a question that would split them into two groups. So, for example, you're saying to two sides. Maybe you could say, are you left-handed or are you right-handed? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question would be, are you left-handed? Because that's got a yes, no answer. All right.
Mhm.
Yes or no. So we've split them up again. I'm going to take this group that are not left-handed here. All right. Maybe the next question is, have you got curly hair? Okay.
I have, which means yeah.
Ah, now you have. So you would be down here, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Wait. What?
Now, I think you're probably the only person in your class that is a boy, that is right-handed, that has curly hair. I may be wrong, but
I'm
we...
both-handed.
Oh, yes, are you now? Really?
Yeah.
Very clever. All right, well, my binary key hasn't worked out very well because that handedness question wasn't a good one. It's got to have a yes, no answer, you see. Which is your stronger hand?
Right.
Right, okay. Well, it works if we say, what your stronger hand is. But can you
Well,
see, Alf, can you see how we've started off with the whole class, yeah?
yeah.
And we've got down to where Alvin is,
Yeah.
just by asking these yes, no questions. Make sense?
Yeah.
So we can classify things according to whether they have certain, and we come back to a word we introduced last time, characteristics. Now, can you think of an example of a characteristic that you can see?
Ooh.
In other
A
words, a physical.
characteristic is a student or a teacher.
No, no, a characteristic would be something like big nose or small ears or tall or short or pointy
Or
tail.
hairy chin.
Well, you have to be careful because if you grow the hair on your chin, then you can have a characteristic which is not genetic, which you've not got from your parents. It's just something that you've decided to grow. Like, for example, you could have a tattoo on your face which says, I'm really clever. That would be silly, wouldn't it? Because you wouldn't be
Yeah,
very clever for having a tattoo on your face saying that. But do you see what I mean? It's not something that you're born with. Yeah?
yeah.
So we need characteristics that you're born with, really. Can you think of any?
Um, Tiny toes.
Tiny toes, for example. Have you got tiny toes?
I've got big toes.
You certainly have, young man, I know. All right. So those characteristics allow us to identify whether things are, for example, in a particular species. Now, do you remember what a species was? A species,
Yeah.
what can you tell me about the babies of creatures within a species?
A baby of creatures wouldn't have any more children.
That's right. The babies can't have babies, right?
Yeah.
So those poor geeps can't have little geeps, and so on. If we take the whole animal kingdom and the whole plant kingdom, we could divide it all up. Now, we start off with a kingdom, and let's have a look at animals and plants. And those animals can be divided into two groups. One has got backbones, and one has got no backbones. Now, can you think of any animals that has got a backbone?
Bull?
Say that again.
Bull?
A bull, yes, absolutely. Bulls have backbones, don't they?
Yeah.
Of those creatures that have got backbones, we can talk about classes of creatures, and you need to know this. Fish, amphibians, mammals,
Birds?
very good. Birds, do you know the other one?
Um, no, but you did tell me, but I can't remember.
Fish, amphibians, mammals, birds, reptiles.
Oh, I do know reptiles, but there was another species that you told me.
Well, these are all called classes, all right? So these are all classes here. And we have a kingdom, as I say, at the top. These are the phylum chordata, phylum backbones or no backbones. These are called classes. And after this, you can divide these up into different families. And then from families, you
Oh
can
yeah,
divide them up.
arachnids.
Very good. And then finally, you get down to the species at the bottom. But that involves lots of dividing on the way. All right, we're not going to worry about that at the moment. What I'm going to ask you to remember, though, when it comes to your homework, is I'm going to ask you to remember that those lists, kingdom, phylum, class, family, genus, species, you need to remember that order. Okay?
Okay.
You also need to know some of these characteristics of these classes of vertebrates. Now, a
Oh,
vertebrate,
I know one for fish.
go
Funny
on.
mouth.
They have a funny mouth, do they? They sort
Yeah,
of do, don't they? Um, that's quite good. I like that. They also have scales. Yeah.
yeah.
They
They
live,
also have big fins.
they have fins and things like that. What about amphibians? What are amphibians like?
Bunny croaks.
Can you think of an example of an amphibian?
Um, a frog having no fourth leg.
Frogs, absolutely. And both fish and amphibians, when they lay their eggs, they just lay them outside of the body, don't they? And they don't have
Yeah,
shells or anything like that, which is
yeah,
very,
and
yeah,
also, the amphibians lay frog spawn
they do. And they can live on land and in the water, can't
water,
they?
and
That's a,
also they
yeah,
place their nest in the water.
they do, don't they? And they have,
Yeah.
well, you get tadpoles from them. Anyway, let's stop with amphibians. What about mammals?
Mammals. Their babies come out of their tummies like humans.
Yes, excellent. We say they have live birth. In other words, when I saw you being born, you were alive and you came out. Now, you didn't cry. Did you know that? Most
Yeah.
babies, when they're born, they go, "Wah!" You didn't cry. And the nurse wanted you to breathe. And so she gave you a little smack on your bum to try and make you breathe because the idea was that you would go, ow, and then start crying. But you didn't. You just looked at her in a strange way, like, why are you smacking my bottom? You would not cry, Alvin John. Um, but you were quite clearly breathing. So I told the nurse, I said, he's breathing. It's okay. Don't have to smack him anymore. He's breathing. Um, but you were very much alive, and mammals have live birth. Make sense?
Yeah.
What do birds have?
Birds
Yeah.
hatch it from out of their bottoms.
Well, they have eggs that have a shell, don't they? But the and those eggs then grow and develop, but they also have feathers.
Yeah.
And reptiles have scales, don't they?
Yeah.
So there are lots of different characteristics of these different classes of vertebrates, in other words, backboned animals, all right? So
Right.
we can use our binary key that we started off by talking about to get down to the reptile level, can't we? Because we can
Yeah.
say things like, you know, taking the animal kingdom, does it have a backbone? Does it have a backbone? Yes, it's got a backbone. Okay, so it's down here. Has it got scales? Yes, it's got scales. Therefore, it's a reptile, and so on. Does that all sort of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, now I don't want to make things worse for you, but guess how you pronounce this guy's name?
Woes.
I think it's pronounced Versa or something like that. That's how I pronounce it anyway. It sounds right,
Woes.
Versa. And he's an example of a scientist that recently,
Worse.
because of work on DNA, do you remember what DNA was?
Yeah. The
What was
life of an
DNA?
animal.
No, DNA. Can you remember what it looked like?
First of all, if you untangled it, it looks like a very long straight ladder. And if
That's right. I can't draw DNA at all.
oh, you can. That's
Oh,
a perfect DNA symbol.
thank you. Well, DNA anyway. And Versa and other people have looked at the DNA of creatures as a way of trying to work out how, through evolution, we have ended up being the way that we are, and other creatures have ended up being the way that they are. And so they've used this idea of classification based on our DNA. And he's come up with something called the three-domain system. What's it called?
The three domain system.
Absolutely. And we've got three difficult groups here. And I'm just checking my spelling as I look down here. Archaea is one. Bacteria
Two.
is another, yeah. And eukaryotes, which is a word you've come across before,
Prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
absolutely, is the third group. So he's come up with a three-domain system whereby the animal kingdom can be split up into those three groups. And there are other systems as well that people look at, but that's the one that I'd like you to try and remember.
Wait.
Versa, yeah,
Looks like the life of bacteria.
does it? Well,
Yeah.
bacteria is one of these domains, all right? But the whole animal kingdom split up into those three domains is the idea, and his name's Versa. Okay, so you just need to try and learn that little A, unfortunately. And you and I, once we finish the course, and we've only got one topic left, are going to start revising by having a little look at some of the lessons that you've done before and making sure that you can remember them. All right. Thank you for your help, though, tonight.
Okay.
And I guess we'll call it a night. See you.
Bye.
Bye.